Okay. So a couple things. First off, on Thursday, we're going to do the DBQ in class. So that means you have to log on. We're doing it like a test. And I did not give you this because, well, you are at home. But here is the actual paper copy of the DBQ. I have a paper copy of the DBQ, but it's been posted for a couple days, so you should already have it. See, totally. Ready? Ah! And the question is very basic, it's very broad. You have to evaluate a statement about that slavery was the cause of the Civil War. And so you have to make basically you have to agree or disagree or modify, meaning you agree with part or disagree with part of that statement. And it's a pretty good statement, except the only problem is for an essay question like this, a prompt like this. It's pretty broad. And you have a limited amount of time, so focus on what you know, what you feel confident the most about, and write that. You don't have to answer every single part. Just focus on what you know. And if you look at the first part of this DBQ, what caused the session? And most of you, my guess is you've already looked at it because I posted it on Thursday. This is the prompt. These are the directions that come with the traditional AP exam. So you have to use 6 documents, 5-paragraph essay. That's 2 per body paragraph. You only use documents in a body paragraph. You don't use them in your opening or closing. And use 6, and I'll explain the other 3 a little bit more tomorrow. You have to add one more additional piece of information, but it's not that big of a deal. But you have to use 6. Well, we're going to do things a little bit differently on Thursday because of time reasons. You only have to write down, so at home, make sure you get this in here, 4 documents. Because we're only going to do basically a 4-paragraph essay because of time reasons. So that means 2 per paragraph. You must explain basically the purpose of the document, what the document is trying to achieve, relate to something else, but also use that as evidence in your essay. And so only 4. And so on Friday, let's go Thursday. On Thursday, when we start this, log on. You have to have some kind of brainstorm outlining thesis. You have to have organization. And I posted that. I'll show that again tomorrow, but I want to make sure you have the document, had a chance to look at them. And you will turn that into. And then when you write it home, you have 2 options. I'll let you type it or handwrite it and take a picture. And or if not, just turn in a Word document. I will post it. You type it in as an assignment in whatever, or Word 365, whatever it is. And you can do either one. My guess is the AP exam is going to be typing. That's my guess. But if we go back to relative normal, which I can't imagine, but you never know. You never know. In the next couple months, maybe they will go back to the way it was before and it all began. And so we're just gonna, I'll let you decide, which is type or handwrite. If it goes back to handwriting, then we'll go to, everything will be handwritten from then on. Of course, then again, we'd be back in school, we'd be back normal. And so that's what you can have on it, or that's what you can have on Thursday. You will turn that in. You don't need to turn the documents in, but please, this is your copy. So right on this, you'll notice there's a little space under each one. So you jot down, just a couple words, so you don't forget. When you read through the document, jot down a few things. Write down what it is, try to get some kind of historical context, something you can relate it to, something from your knowledge, some backstory to it. But write things down. Because you might think you read document 1 and go, oh, that's so obvious, I know exactly what this is. The free soil argument for the Republican Party. By the time you get to document 4, you've already forgotten. And you have to go back and do it again. If you write it down at a quick glance, you remember it. If you don't write it down, you'll forget. Unless you're one of those very rare people with a photographic memory. Does anybody have a photographic memory here? Do you know anybody with a photographic memory? I know a couple people, and I hate them. Doesn't make me smart, but wouldn't that be nice? But we're not like that. So jot down a couple things. Only take a second. Use your shorthand. You know what you mean when you write, I hope. All right. So that's what we're doing on Thursday. We're going to finish up all the events up the next couple days. I also got a couple more things. I don't think I gave this to you last week. Here's a paper copy of the Hot Tips to Write DBQ. Do you want this? You already want this? Totally cool. Did you see that? Yeah, I know. I got to believe this. Oh, what a play. Make a play. Dive! I brought you the catch. Okay, it's going to skip across the desk. Almost. That was close. So there'll be one more little thing we'll add to the document. You still have to use your own outside information. On the back is how the DBQ is graded. I'll let you read that on your own. I mean, even though I think it's important to know they really weigh the thesis and make sure you use the documents. The big thing is, if you write a good essay, you'll get a good grade. Don't worry too much about the rubric. Which, by the way, I hate the term rubric. Here's just a practice on how to use a few of the documents. And it just shows you examples of how documents are used. But online, I also posted you I posted in Teams like 3, I think, sample opening and paragraphs from a different DBQ. It shows you how they're constructed. There are some students who did a lot, who did a great job. So I stole a couple of their paragraphs. This is the test. You need outside information, but I kind of like this test. DBQs have they can read the documents, go through them. And I'll talk a little bit more about them, but please read through the documents. I'll answer any questions tomorrow. I'll answer any questions on Wednesday. I thought about doing it on Wednesday, but I think I like having at least part of the students here and just happen to work out you'll be at home. Don't read too much into it, A day or B day. It happens when it happens. I try not to worry about it too much. Okay, so let's go ahead then and finish up the events that led to war. Because it's snowballing here, so many amazing things are happening. Who would, in response to the sack of Lawrence, who would be beaten on the floor of the United States Senate by Preston Bully Brooks? Yeah, Sumner would be beaten. And Brooks would be kicked out of Congress and then reelected right back, and his admirers would send him thousands of new what? Yeah, new canes. Who would lead a massacre in retaliation against, got a question? Who would lead the retaliation at Potawatomi Creek against border ruffians? John Brown. What was the free slavery constitution that would finally be elected, even though, yeah, that's Topeka. Lecompton was the other one. And so all these things are happening. Did we get to, I didn't put it up. So I believe we got right to the Republican Party. So this would be the other big thing coming out of this. But now the Republican Party, it didn't have to be. It wasn't guaranteed that would be the second party. We have a winner-take-all system. We're stuck with 2 parties. And there would be a competition. 2 parties would try to step in and take over for the vacuum created by the Whigs just imploding over this. So I think I mentioned all this, Free Soil Democrats, abolitionists. I got through that. And then we talk about this, the Republican. And the big thing about this is this would be the opposition to the Southern view. So I think we got right here to opportunity. This idea, we're the Republican Party. really took this free labor idea to basically mean all workers have all this choice. There's all this opportunity here. All you have to do is show, and they would talk about this all the time, show initiative. You show initiative, you can succeed because there's opportunity in the north. There's opportunity here. You can move up or down if you fail, but at least you have the opportunity to have a chance to make some measure of success. And so the whole point is, don't you want that system to go to the territories and not the stifling system of the North? In fact, they've said in this, or the stifling system of the South stifles opportunity. Regardless of what happens, you're stuck in your class, you'll never get out, and you have to compete with slaves for a job. That's why immigrants go to the North and they don't go to the South. This is the soon to be the Northern ideology. And this will be why our system is better. Now, this really is, the free labor ideology of the early Republicans was very much pre-capitalist. It underestimated the value of capital, the person who owns the machines, and how expensive that was, and how that does limit some opportunity. But still, that is their ideology. And so therefore, they're free soil. No slavery in the territories. Yes, the tiny group of abolitionists in the North joined the Republican Party, but the Republican Party is not an abolitionist party. The vast majority of Northerners, regardless of party, were not abolitionists. Even if they didn't like slavery, they were like, okay, we don't care what you do in South Carolina, which is, there's some moral questions about that, but we don't care what you do. We just don't want slavery, any more slavery in the territories. We're tired of slave power. Remember that? And the big thing is, this is therefore the counter ideology that would develop to the Southern ideology. That positive, good theory of slavery, and that all Northerners are John Browns. We're not done with John Brown. So this is the opposite. And the thing is, you have these two ideologies developing, especially in the South, where they refuse to believe anything other than they are attacking our very existence. The North is attacking. They refuse to believe, they refuse to see any other point of view. More and more, but especially the South, are living in different realities. Now, when I mean the South, I mean the kind of ruling class, because it very much was an aristocracy. Ideologies are what the worst, most horrible wars are fought over, are ideologies. And so, in 1856, we have a presidential election in the middle of somewhat a civil war. Remember, this is 1856, the same year as Pottawatomie Creek, Osawatomie, the sack of Lawrence, Sumner Brooks. What an election. The Democrats are going to stick with popular sovereignty. They're stuck to it. But the Democrats are now very much a Southern party. Many Northern Democrats went to the Republicans, free soil, and almost all Southern Whigs, they went to the Democratic Party. There's no Republican Party in the South, period. None. Doesn't exist. In fact, even in the kind of border states like Maryland or Delaware, there's virtually no Republican Party. It's only a Northern party. So, in this election, James Buck Buchanan of Pennsylvania, former Secretary of State, he wanted to be president back in 1844. He was considered a moderate. What moderate in this context means is popular sovereignty. So the moderate point of view is pro-slavery. Radical was slavery's bad, which should tell you a lot about what those terms really mean. Now, Buck Buchanan, if you look him up, this is Buck Buchanan, this is him, this is 1856, this is him in 1969 right there in Super Bowl IV. He was soon become the Hall of Fame defensive tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Buck Buchanan, one of my favorite all-time football players. This is what he looked like in 1856. Oops, right there. I prefer that, Buck Buchanan, greatly, but went to Grambling. That's Buck Buchanan. And control yourself, because I don't want people to swoon or get jealous, but he was the most eligible bachelor in America in 1856. Yeah, I know. You're either going to be jealous or you're going to swoon, but Buchanan, the moderate, popular sovereignty, he was a doughface. He's a doughface. He's the definition of a doughface. But another party jumped into the fray, the Know-Nothings, aka the American Party. And we've mentioned them once before. They thought they had a chance to become the second party. They jumped in with former President Millard Fillmore. Remember, he's the one who was president during the Compromise of 1850. He was Taylor's vice president. And the Know-Nothing, it all stems from the Order of the Star-Spangled Banner, which was a secret society at first, and if anybody asked you about it, and you remember, you were supposed to respond with, I know nothing. So that's how the term became used for the party. It was to mock it, but then they jumped on it and they accepted it. So campaign songs were a big deal when they first began to print music with the new industrial processes. So here's the Know-Nothing polka, dedicated to everybody by nobody. Get it? And I know polkas are big again today, right? I mean, everyone loves a good polka. But that was like the really kind of hip, cool music for the kids in 1856. They're the nativist party. Anti-immigrant, and this cartoon is a very much an anti-Catholic, anti-papist, which is anti-Catholic. Here's the Pope on St. Peter's Cathedral at the top, and he's eyeing America, and that is next. So this is the anti-immigrant party. We talked about that in the 1840s with German and Irish immigrants coming. And ironically, the number of immigrants had dropped dramatically in the 1850s because the potato blight had somewhat subsided in both Ireland and in Germany, all over Europe, and the US, but really in Ireland worse, as I mentioned before. But a party came out of this a decade after the height of nativism, you would think, or the height of immigration. But the most intense anti-immigrant immigration feeling today happened years after the peak of immigration. 2016, 2017, very nativist here, but the height of immigration was 18 years before that. It's actually been dropping pretty dramatically. But I think it's kind of like when it builds from the peak. And this party was pretty solid in the North and the South. And it had a legitimate shot to become the second party. And then the Republican Party. So I already mentioned them. They obviously did become that second party. And the Republican Party, only a Northern party, they tried to choose a war hero, jumping on the old Whig bandwagon of Taylor, Scott, and old Tippecanoe. And that right there, he's the pathfinder. He's the guy who just happened to be in California when California rebelled in 1846 against Mexico. And his name is, of course, John C. And Fremont. John Charles was very popular. Yes, Calhoun was John Caldwell. Fremont and his campaign slogan should tell you everything you need to know about the Republicans. Free soil, free labor, Fremont. Get it? Yeah, it's not bad. Free soil, free labor, Fremont. But the whole point is they wanted to try somebody who was well known. He's only on the ballot in northern states. He's not on the ballot in any state that has slavery at all. No states. When the election ended, it's a pretty remarkable electoral vote. By the way, the electoral vote, they're counting it right now for this election. After the states certified, they send it in, so they're counting them at this moment. It's a done deal, but they formally certify it today. So Buchanan won, but you notice his power is now in the South. He is a Southern candidate. But first, the American Party did not win, only won a few electoral votes, but look how many total votes they got. That's how nativist, anti-immigrant this country was. And Look how good Fremont did, and he wasn't even on the ballot in any southern state. The American Party was on the ballot in most southern states. They weren't. This is just the North. First time the Republicans ran a candidate, and they got a third of the vote, all from the North. And they could do the math. The South could do the math. And this terrified them. Just imagine the next election if there's no third party siphoning away votes. And all the North voted for Republicans. There could be a Republican president with no votes in the South. So yeah, they got their Dolphins. They got Buchanan. But they were terrified. Oops. Why is it just flashing? Everyone relax. I was going to put down the South panning, but for some reason that's not working. What if I hit some weird button? There's no reason why that shouldn't have worked. Why? The South panicked. Let's see if this works now. The South panicked. And all they could think about was the next election. And this is an important thing to think about. It's not what's going to happen. They don't know what's going to happen. It's what might happen. What happens if they do get a Republican? And they could do the math. The population is exploding in the North. That means the number of members of the House of Representatives is going to be overwhelmingly Northern by 1870, maybe even 1860. They know they're outnumbered. Every day they get weaker in the South, they're thinking. Every day. We're weaker, they're stronger. And eventually they'll squash us. If we wait, we're doomed. More and more they begin to think that. And that's a scary thing. I better act today because tomorrow's going to be worse. But you have no idea what tomorrow's going to be. No idea. And part of the thing is, what might happen if we get a president, John Brown? Because that's the way they looked at it. And so, the very next year, the most controversial Supreme Court case in history will be decided by the Taney Court. Dred Scott versus Sanford, 1857. Dred and Harriet Scott were slaves, and their owner, actually it's two Sanfords here, but moved to what then was Wisconsin territory, and then Illinois, which were both free states. Now what made them free is they didn't have slave trades. So they're still slaves, but they're owned here. And abolitionist friends petitioned the petitioned the federal court system, saying, because it's Wisconsin territory, federal court, they should be free because they lived in a state without slave codes. They should be free. And so that was a court case. And this had happened a lot. And actually, there have been other efforts that have been thrown out, but this one made it to the Supreme Court. And everybody was watching this case. Right after this election, at the height of Southern fear. Yes? Yeah. And so what happened was, when he died and left the Scots to his sister, that is when friends sued. Justice Roger Taney, yes, that picture is, wow. He looks pretty rough there. Taney, who'd been on the Supreme Court since 1835, he was from Maryland, a slave owner. But he saw sectionalism as the problem. What's sectionalism? Half slave, half free. North versus South. Free states, slave states. That's the problem. If we get rid of this, there'll be no threat of civil war. Everybody's talking civil war by 1857. Everybody. This should remind you a little bit of Zachary Taylor in 1850. thinking I'll solve the issue of slavery in the territories by making California and New Mexico free states. That's what Taney's going to do. He took this case and ruled on the case after the first part of the opinion of the case said, blacks, they're not citizens. Not just slave or free, blacks are not citizens. This is a white republic and only white people are citizens. So this case should have been thrown out right there. But then he still ruled, what is it called? Obiter dictum is the legal term. Got to use some mispronounced Latin. No one knows what Latin sounds like. So they're not citizens. They have no what's called standing. Standing means you might have some direct impact in the case. Well, they don't have direct impact because they're not citizens. But he ruled anyways because he's going to solve the entire problem. Slaves, they're property. And if slaves are property, you can bring slaves anywhere. Property is protected by the Constitution. So there's absolutely no change in their condition or their property if you cross state lines. So they're Wisconsin Territory or Illinois, the state of Illinois. The Scots were property just as any other property. And therefore, any law that banned this property was unconstitutional. So this is what we got to get here. The Missouri Compromise and the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 were unconstitutional because it violated people's rights to property. So that basically opened much of the North to slavery, technically. Now, it was obviously unclear whether or not slaves could go there, but it said that any federal law that banned slavery when they were territories was unconstitutional. But that's why places like Pennsylvania, New York, they don't apply because they had constitutions when the United States was created. The rest of the places came in later. It was unclear still if they could find federal laws unconstitutional. Remember Marbury versus Madison, that still was not clear. But that's what they ruled. An incredible ruling. Absolutely incredible. Taney thought, problem solved. Who could resist or who could be upset now? All states can have slavery, no civil war. So he basically engineered a ruling, one of the most faulty in history. He will be forever tainted by this. He would be Chief Justice throughout the entire Civil War. And unlike a lot of slaveholders in Maryland, he stayed loyal to the Union. Yet he will be forever tainted by Dred Scott. And that's all you had to say then is Dred Scott. That ruling. In the North, the reaction was overwhelmingly opposed. And this would help what political party? Who? Exactly. The Republican parties who said, we told you so. We told you they were going to do this. We told you the South was going to force you to have slavery. That's why we need free soil. We told you so. And this gets to this whole thing of their conspiracy theories running amok. Nothing at all like today. The North then, many in the North, even Democrats who stayed loyal to the National Democratic Party were mad about this. The North and the South were furious. And I added this one more time. They both said, told you so, we told you so. Republicans were upset. Many in the North were upset. And because Northerners were upset, the South was upset. How dare you not obey law? Remember the Southern, what was the term that the South would create beginning in this era that meant pro-slavery? What was that term? Yeah, states' rights. This proves they don't care about states' rights. They want to force northern states to have slavery if it protects their slavery in the South. States' rights was always just a slogan. They're furious. So everybody talked Dred Scott. Dred Scott, Dred Scott, Dred Scott, Dred Scott. And then, of course, we have a panic. Of course. The panic of 1857. Bank failure, stock market crash, over speculation in railroads. That's why I have a railroad picture here. But here's the thing. With people losing their jobs, not as much money in circulation, Many factories had to shut their doors. There are many factories in the South, but the price of cotton prices, I should have put, tumbled. Cotton prices tumbled dramatically. Cotton prices tumbled. Cotton prices tumbled. And so remember I told you they're already insecure, and they see like this big storm coming, well, that made it worse. They're not making as much money at the exact time where it looked like the Republican Party was growing and would be a real threat. And they could see the population. It's a steamroller effect. Here's a picture of the actual financial, or here's a painting done of the financial panic. And it's showing people outside of Wall Street, of the stock exchange. And here they are talking paper, reading newspapers, but a lot of that pieces of paper. And these were stocks, bonds, things like that they thought were worth money, and the prices were dropping like a rock. So this shows the panic. But my favorite part about this picture is, I think you can see it. Doesn't look like he's fishing for people, for cats or something right here. Just casting away. Okay, that's the whip it carries, but cotton prices tumbled. And with that, in 1858, Illinois was having an election for the Senate. Stephen Douglas is going to win. I mean, everyone knows Douglas is a shoo-in. And don't forget, senators were chosen by state assemblies, not by voters. State assemblies. Voters wouldn't choose senators until 1914 was the first election. And we're coming to the Lincoln-Douglas debate. Both running for the Illinois Senate, 1858. Douglas, or Lincoln, he got a little bit of fame from that spot resolution back during the Mexican War. He now was a Republican, and he was running against Douglas, and he was almost a foot taller than Douglas, so it must have been interesting on the stage. But the whole issue was Dred Scott. Everybody, that's the whole thing, Dred Scott. Basically, are northern states going to be forced to have slavery, let alone slavery in the territories? Dred Scott, Dred Scott. And Illinois really is a microcosm of the entire U.S. Illinois, southern Illinois is very southern. To this day, you feel like you're in the South. It doesn't feel a heck of a lot different than Tennessee or Kentucky. Northern Illinois is more a northern feel. And if you drive north to south in Illinois, you see it. To this day, you can see the change. And it has to do with agriculture. When you drive here, it's all corn, miles of corn. If you like corn, corn. And then you just kind of cross a line up here, and it turns to wheat. Just all of a sudden you're in wheat. And that's kind of like the shift in Illinois. Wheat, cattle, corn, pig. That's what they used to say. And so when they were going around on this debate, and it's nothing like if you watch the presidential debates, like in this last election, they ask quick little questions, they give pithy little talking points. Nothing ever really gets resolved. Their debates now are pretty awful. Basically, people watch and see if somebody makes a big gaffe or mistake, or somebody gets a good one-liner in, which really, that's how they debate. There haven't been that many. I mean, the first presidential debate wasn't until 1960. So debates rarely happen. But this debate, longer debates, not only were answered questions from the audience, from people and themselves, longer questions, a much more substantive debate. But when Lincoln announced that he was running for the Senate in Springfield, he made this statement saying, "A house divided against itself cannot survive. The United States cannot survive either half slave or both half slave and half free. It's going to have to change. A house divided against itself. This will end. Can we end it peacefully? Can we end it with war?" That was unclear. But Lincoln is making that statement. Now, Kennedy made it very clear. He's a free soil. No more slavery in the territories. States should not be forced to have slavery, but He, like most Republicans, did not want to touch slavery in the South at all. In fact, Lincoln's goal in 1858 was slaves should be freed and then sent to where?
Oh, Africa.
Yeah, to Africa. That's what he thought. And he would be that way up till well into the Civil War. He too was, like many, the white Republic. Now, Douglas, though, Douglas is going to win. The state Senate was going to be Democratic. He knew it. He's going to win. He's using this as a way to set up his 1860 presidential run. And so he's got to appease, he's got to please some northern votes, but the Democrats are a southern party now. He can't offend the South. And so up here in Freeport, which is a much more anti-slavery part of Illinois, he would make what's called the Freeport Doctrine. I love that picture of Fremont. The face isn't retouched. Oh, did I say Fremont? Douglas. You get at least an idea of what he looked like. I like that picture. But what he said here was, states and territories, yeah, sure, Dred Scott says they have to have slaves, but they can avoid it if they don't pass slave codes. So, yeah, Dred Scott says Illinois is open to slavery, but without slave codes, slavery can't survive. So everyone got that. That is the Freeport Doctrine. He tried to straddle the fence with the Freeport Doctrine. So he could say to Northerners, you don't have to have slaves. But he said to Southerners, I support Dred Scott. Who is happy with Douglas here? Nobody. Southerners didn't trust him because he wouldn't go full-throated for slave codes in the North. Northerners didn't trust him because he said, hey, I'm for Dred Scott. Douglas would please nobody. And he was a very popular and talented politician. He was trapped. Now, when I mean trapped, he could have made the moral decision against slavery. He refused to do that. And so that's Douglas and the Freeport Doctrine. And we're leading right back to this man. While that's going on, and Douglas would win, Lincoln got a little bit of fame. The debate was really published in the newspaper. Lincoln's still very unknown. Who's that? John Brown. He is pledging to fight against slavery. His hand shook a little bit. The long exposure times to get the kind of almost looks like he's moving, which I guess he was. But John Brown. And what John Brown, he'd grown a beard. He was hiding in upstate New York in that burnt over region, aided by abolitionists. And he decided he's going to attack the South. John Brown is going to lead a raid into Harper's Ferry, Virginia, which is now West Virginia. It's on the Potomac River, just south of the Maryland border, one of the most beautiful areas of the country, one of the most beautiful places I've ever been, is Harper's Ferry. It's shocking how pretty it is. That's the poster from it down here. It's unreal. Wow. Part of the reason is, got the mountains, but also it rains there. So everything's just green and lush. It's an amazing place. But there was an armory there where they made muskets for the United States military. And he was going to raid the armory there, steal the weapons along with pikes, long spears he brought down, and start a slave rebellion. Now, there are no plantations in the mountains right there, so he had to get out of that region into southern Virginia, free slaves, and then they would hide in the Appalachian Mountains and raid. He is threatening to start a slave rebellion, which was the greatest fear that slave owners had. It is unclear if he really meant to start a slave rebellion or if this was a political action to bring or to force people to come to terms with slavery. My guess is he never really wanted to start a slave rebellion. But he knew this would terrify the South, and it did. Remember I kept on saying about John Brown being president? Well, this would confirm it. When he got there, he took the armory, but then didn't leave Harper's Ferry and allowed himself to get bottled up. That pretty much proves to me this was never the plan. I wonder if he was hoping he would be, it would be stopped and killed while it was going on and become a martyr. He seems like that type of person. But soon, U.S. forces, mostly Marines and Army, there's we had a few troops in Washington, D.C. Robert E. Lee would lead them. They stormed the firehouse where he was hiding out. Brown would be wounded, but it ended right there. And Brown would be captured and tried for starting an insurrection, which is a capital offense. Capital means execution. Tomorrow, just a little bit left to finish, please read through the documents. Read through the material I've given you. If there are any questions, I'll go through any questions on the documents or anything tomorrow. Same deal on Wednesday, if you type them to me. Now, if anybody does not have that little packet about the Civil War, they have it online, and I did think I gave this out last week, but if you don't have it, for a copy right here, you grab on the way out. Goodbye. Some of the best things. Okay. And like, yeah, true.
It's how we dealing with the bully, Western histories of the cotton was not
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's the place you mentioned on panic.
okay.
And liberation. So that's perfect. And then that sets it up then on all their beers, and boom, you roll into the wall.
Okay.
Oh, you know what?
Thank you.
John Brown. John C. Calhoun.
I told my mom, I was like, I'm so excited John C. Brown is finally dead because I don't get to hear